hi everybody. I'm happy to cheer you up from academia, so isn't it funny? Enough already, but yes, I'm Triin, I'm from Tallinn University. I'm associate professor in public policy, but I'm also running my postdoctoral project in Konstanz University in Germany. And my postdoctoral project is about skill regimes. However, I quite recently started that, so my today's talk is more about, or I think I have more questions than answers, and hopefully, even despite that I'm from academia and from different discipline, I'm from comparative social policy, and I am aware of your disciplinary background, which is very diverse and not even perhaps close, so I take that on board. I try to make my talk as bearable as possible, or hopefully even enjoyable. So, let's start. Education, no question, it's crucial, isn't it? We are growingly more talking about education as a problem as well. So, of course, we know education is a solution for both at individual level, at country level, it helps us. But growingly more, we are aware of the problems also, which are stemming from education system, whether it is too anachronistic or whether it creates new cleavages in the society, which means that it even pulls us apart instead of connecting us. So my main idea behind today's talk is to think about how to conceptualize or think about skills which will manage to reconnect us as a society, and at the same time will be good enough or excellent for labor market as well. And of course, why I think this idea about reconnecting us is important. The bottom line or the main assumption behind that is that actually we are living in a very turbulent time. So we have to change job, we have to change even occupations, we have to change homes, we have to, or we very often change families. So it's a liquid love era, and we have to have skills to cope with that turbulence. So my talk centers on how comparative political science conceptualizes skills, whether these conceptualizations are still valid or whether they at least have managed successfully to go through the stress test. The answer is no, according to my understanding. And then also we will, or I have some questions, hopefully we'll discuss with you as well later on, what type of skill sets we need for future. So let's start with two theories. I try to be as short as, I try to make it short. So comparative social policies never can get rid of that book, which is Gösta Esping Andersen, Danish author, sociologist, who is talking about 3 types of welfare capitalisms. So basically this idea is that in Europe at least, or in developed world, we have 3 types of countries, and these differences are stemming from the aspect from where actually, from which sources we will get our welfare. And very simply put, the one type is Nordic countries, social democratic countries, so it's very dominantly state-funded welfare policies, social policies, education policies. Then we have Anglo-Saxon, UK version, very much dependent on NGOs or private providers, especially in education, and then continental Europe, Southern Europe, where very much we depend, our welfare depends on our family ties, and even if it's not written, and even if it's not so explicitly there, the bottom line from that book is that the more state, the better. The more state, in other words, Nordic countries are the best from the perspective of welfare, comparative welfare policies. And sometimes they include education policies, sometimes not, but I think one message from here, from this most important, most cited sociological book is that the more money, the better. So let's see. This is your scatter plot of European countries. X-axis, educational expenditures, y-axis, social policy expenditures. So we see actually there are two groups of countries discernible. Nordic countries, which means that they invest in both social policies, heavily invest in social policies, let's say so, heavily, dominantly by public money, and also in education policies. And then another group, which is here below, Eastern European countries, sorry Latvians, sorry Lithuanians, sorry Estonians, but nothing to do. We do not invest so much into education, not so much into social policy. However, it has been perhaps ideological choice, not only because we are poor. And then we have lots of countries up there as well, the Netherlands. For instance, you'll see, because it's above this trend line, which meaning that actually this country puts more, comparatively more, or relatively more money into social policy compared to education policy. So according to that picture, if we take, and I know I'm hugely oversimplifying here, but if we take that picture, then according to that data, empirical data, we see that those countries above the trend line, they are more investing in compensatory social policies like pensions, unemployment benefits, and relatively less compared to education. And the other way around, yeah. And Eastern European countries, even if they do not invest a lot, they put a little bit or relatively more money into education compared to social policy. Whether it pays off, I know it's a small slide. It's not very clear from that picture. But again, the bottom line is money doesn't buy strong performance, not at least in education. Not at least in education. And even if we look at here, Latvia, Lithuania here, Estonia somewhere, it was here, the Netherlands here. So even, especially when we are talking about rich countries, then money doesn't pay off. So at least not until a certain level. So the question is, okay, if money doesn't pay, or if money doesn't buy good performance, what does? I think one aspect we have to take into account in living in democracies, that perhaps public perceptions, so perhaps what public think about education. Here again, we have based on survey data, here this left panel, we see data from 8 European countries, and how they answer to the question about whether we should invest more money into education compared to healthcare, etc., etc. Message clear. Everybody wants to get more education. It's a crowd pleaser. If you're a politician, it's a very clever thing to talk about education. Here we have Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Yeah, that's okay to put some money into education as well. However, compared to healthcare and compared to old age, not that much. Of course, we know and we saw from previous picture as well, that these countries actually spend relatively little into old age pensions and other social policy. That's why. Perhaps it's that's why. But still we see, I think, quite clearly from those pictures I have shown that education actually is important and it enjoys strong popular support. However, money doesn't buy a good performance. So the question is, what does? And next and last, a theoretical framework today, and more directly linked to the skills, is another framework very popular in comparative social policy, which is Varieties of Capitalism by Hall and Soskins. According to that framework, we have 2 types of countries: coordinated market economies and liberal market economies. Coordinated market economies such as Germany, also Nordic countries, Austria, liberal market economies such as UK, but according to many authors also all Baltic countries. So according to that framework, this coordination style or type in different countries between employers, employees, and state, it influences what type of skills are the most preferentially developed in those countries. In other words, in liberal market economies, the relative advantage to invest more in general skills is present, and in coordinated market economies, it's the other way around. It's more the incentive system itself incentivizes to invest more in specific skills. So basically, if you as a student, you have to make decisions whether I want to lean more toward academic or more toward vocational skills, then incentive system give you additional incentives to put your energy to study specific skills. This is and again, oversimplified version of that theory. The main or the bottom line from that theory is that actually both types of capitalisms, LMEs and CMEs, they actually are well prepared to survive this transformation from industrial to post-industrial societies, but they do it differently. And for countries like Germany, for instance, CME, the winning formula is to invest more into vocational education. So the conclusion from that assumption would be that the more countries invest in vocational education, specific skills, the better results they show in the economy. And again, very simplified picture. Here we have a scatter plot, European countries, x-axis how much money per capita, per student, spent in vocational education, and y-axis GDP per capita. Yes, we see some positive correlation. However, we see that both types of countries are there, LMEs and CMEs. So even despite of the fact that the UK, for instance, here, doesn't invest so much into vocational education and training, it still kind of flourishes from the economic term, and we have lots of outliers as well. Okay, perhaps it's not money, perhaps it's how much students decide to go to vocational education. Another scatter plot. Here we have how much students study in the programs which are categorized as vocational education, and x-axis is, y-axis is the same, GDP per capita in country. No association at all. Of course, we all know that correlation is not causation. I am not here to say that skill regime doesn't matter. I'm not here to say that skill specificity is not important. Rather, I think it's not enough. We need some additional explanation, or at least we have some missing link in that causality. One potential problem, or one source of explanation we need, additional source of explanation we need, might be related to the factor specificity. Just try to think about different types of specificity, One way to think about it is your skills are firm specific, Quite a risky choice, isn't it? Especially now when the time is very turbulent. Then it can be also industry specific, But still, I think we face a kind of problem of portability. Whether you can take your skills, I don't know, here or here or here, and move to another company and still make them work. So basically, whether you can, whether your investment into skills pays off, even if you move to another company, to another country, to another sector. And we know from McKinsey and from everyone, and you know it better, that actually we are talking growingly more about social skills, transferable skills, general skills, which means that that we do not want to say that we need invest more heavily in general skills at the cost of specific skills, but rather that in addition to specific skills, so the general aim is to find a good balance between skill specificity and general skills. Okay, how to do that, or what would be my suggestions or ideas for future skill set? And I think my main sources of inspiration for next couple of slides came from recent crises, from COVID crisis, which according to my understanding and according to many books I have read recently, actually revealed many problems we have in our societies. And we haven't we had those problems earlier, but we haven't really taken those problems seriously. And one of the problems actually pandemic situation made clear is the essential value of so-called essential workers, or if we use a very beautiful categorization of David Coulthard, hard workers. So none of our existing conceptualization, at least not in comparative social policy, conceptualizations about skills, take into account care workers, or so-called hard workers. We have hand workers, those who have vocational education, then we have brain workers or head workers, those with more academic education, and then we kind of make hard workers invisible. And I think this is a mistake. Another aspect I think COVID crisis very well has revealed is the problem of loneliness, the politics of loneliness. So basically, we haven't acknowledged the problem of loneliness, and I argue here that this has something to do with our skill set. And we have kind of neglected the importance of social skills, especially now when we have to cope with these turbulences we are living in. And another source of inspiration for me here has been the book by Norena Hertz, who is talking about the lonely century. And according to her, and according to many other writers and authors as well, we are growingly talking about me, myself, and I. Individualistic societies with very self-interested ideas or self-interested activities instead of common good. So basically, we have been living in the very neoliberally minded societies, but I argue that to live in inclusive society instead of neoliberal society, you need a different skill set. And this movement from I, or from we to I, actually, it's very well even statistically proven based on popular music. So decades ago, we used to sing "we are the champions," and actually the phrase "we" was used much more often compared to "I." Now, in recent decades, actually, we have seen this "I" tripled instead of "we." So now we sing "I am a god" instead of "we." So the question is how to reconnect our society, taking seriously the problem of loneliness and the problem of feeling of exclusion. And my last two slides are talking about at least some very preliminary ideas how to approach this problem of loneliness, or how to take more social skills on board when we are conceptualizing skill regimes. And of course, one point here to make is that we should mix loneliness and aloneness, because very many people actually are quite okay to be alone, and it's sometimes very useful to be alone. It doesn't mean loneliness. And it's very well also illustrated by those figures. People in Nordic countries, but also surprisingly in Estonia and in the Netherlands, we live alone, very often, growingly often, we live alone. However, we kind of have a very good social network we can trust on once we need. So it's not necessarily only aloneness, but loneliness and aloneness is a different things, different aspects. But why loneliness is so acute problem, according to my understanding and according to many authors I'm inspired of. Loneliness and feelings of marginalization, it might fuel divisiveness and even extremism, which means that this affective, or in other words, it has political consequences. Loneliness has political consequences, and one sign of it is the growing affective polarization, which means that we do not disagree in some political issues, but rather we do not agree because I hate him or her, not because we have different opinions on some matters. And here is again a very simplified map of European countries whether people can be trusted, which is one potential indication of marginalization, and another indication is whether political systems allow people to have influence on politics, and the higher the value, the more trustable people are, and the more they think that they can influence policy. Of course, I do not want to make any very clear conclusion based on that, but again, you see that these differences across countries are huge. Okay, my conclusion. According to my understanding as a comparative social policy scholar, conceptualization of skilled regimes have to look both market and social needs, according to my understanding, especially today when we know that the nature of work itself has actually changed, and we have to, or there are these formats of working actually have changed so much that sometimes it's not so easy to disentangle whether I'm working or whether I'm living or dealing with other things. So basically everything is together. Second point here is that money is necessary but not sufficient to buy performance in education, or when we're talking about skill regimes or skills. So money is not enough, it's important but not enough. Skill specificity, again, it's important but not enough. But we have to be aware, and my suggestion would be that we have to take on board hard work and the politics of loneliness when we are designing our future skill sets. Thank you.